Earlier this week, our intelligence agencies stopped a potential terrorist attack. And I'm not talking about the underwear bomber who is actually working for the CIA and the Saudi government. I'm talking about a real terrorist here, who we stopped without the help of the Saudis or an undercover CIA agent. We did it with the good old-fashioned TSA detective work. Can you spot the terrorist here, who we thwarted? I'll give you a hint. Her weapon of choice wasn't an underwear bomb, but it could have been a diaper bomb. There she is, meet 18-month-old Riyanna, the latest threat to our nation's security. The very thing that Representative Louis Gohmert was talking about when he warned us all about terror babies. Luckily, Rihanna's nefarious plot was foiled by the TSA on Tuesday before we lost a JetBlue flight out of the Fort Lauderdale airport.
At 18 months old, Riyanna has been called a lot of things: cute, adorable, and now suspected terrorist. It happened Tuesday night at the airport in Fort Lauderdale. Riyanna and her parents had just boarded a JetBlue flight. They were heading home to New Jersey. They say that's when a JetBlue employee told them they had to get off the plane. Agents from the Transportation Security Agency, the TSA, needed to speak to them.
You see, the TSA had done its job. They protected America by putting 18-month-old Riyanna on the no-fly list before she could do any damage. Rihanna's parents, who are American citizens from New Jersey, just like their daughter, were told they were free to fly, but they had to leave their terrorist Riyanna behind. So it's 1 point for America, 0 points for the terrorists. And it's just the latest bomb plot foiled by the TSA. A few weeks ago, the TSA stopped this potential terrorist, 7-year-old Dina Frank, who suffers from cerebral palsy. Unlike Riyanna, Dina doesn't look like she's from Middle Eastern descent, so this was an especially good catch by the TSA. Dina was stopped from boarding the plane and forced to miss her flight because the TSA had to make sure she didn't have plastic explosives stashed in her crutches.
If you can you lift your shirt up? If you don't want to do it here, I can do the thing to a private screen in there, right? Okay. The back side?
That young boy might also have had a bomb wired to his wheelchair. Thankfully, the TSA did its job of making America safe by feeling him up before he was capable of taking down an American airliner, too. So we should all take a moment right now and thank the TSA for groping one child after another so that we can all sleep better at night knowing that our skies are safe from terror babies. Of course, to all the Americans who aren't afraid of terror babies blowing up planes, then all this must look pretty damn silly. It must look like security theater. And when you're taking an 18-month-old child off airplanes and groping disabled kids to check for bombs, then it's not just security theater, it's security theater of the absurd. And those of us who aren't living each day in fear of terrorists, we're rather taken aback by just how crazy and frankly fearful the United States has become. How did we become a nation of frightened cowards? Well, Bush and Cheney made us this way. Former National Security Advisor in the Clinton administration, Sandy Berger, told me that Bill Clinton had told George W. Bush when they handed off the presidency to him in January 2001 that Osama bin Laden was planning to attack America and that Bush should do something about it. Al Gore delivered the same message to Dick Cheney, as did Sandy Berger to Condi Rice. Bush appointed Cheney to head up a task force to look into it in February 2001. But that task force never met until September of 2001. Instead, Cheney spent all his time working with oil industry executives carving up the oil fields in Iraq, which we hadn't even invaded yet. Then on August 6th of 2001, summer of 2001, the CIA became so alarmed that an attack on America by al-Qaeda was so imminent that they sent a special CIA agent to Crawford, Texas, to personally brief George W. Bush about it. Here's Condoleezza Rice describing the title of that briefing.
The August 6 PDB warned against possible attacks in this country. And I ask you whether you recall the title of that PDB.
I believe the title was Bin Laden determined to attack inside the United States.
So what did Bush do after he learned that New York and Washington, D.C. were almost certainly going to be attacked in the next few months? And that he and Cheney had totally dropped the ball on doing anything about it to prevent it? He decided to extend his presidential vacation in Texas out to be the longest one in the history of the U.S. presidency. And then after almost a month of no attacks, Bush had to go someplace, but he was still afraid to come here to Washington, D.C. So instead, he flew to Florida, where his brother Jeb Bush put the entire state on a high-security lockdown. And George W. Bush sat in Florida waiting for the attack. It came while he was in an elementary school classroom reading My Pet Goat to a group of kids. And then he sat there for 7 long minutes, scared out of his mind, after hearing that the World Trade Center had gone down and another plane was heading across Pennsylvania for D.C. He then hopped in Air Force One and hopscotched from Florida to Louisiana, and then from Louisiana to Nebraska, afraid to set down very long anywhere, just picking up fuel and moving along. Cheney, meanwhile, was hiding in an underground bunker below the White House. And these two fearful and incompetent men have left us this horrible legacy. After flying around the country on Air Force One after 9/11 and being afraid to return back to Washington, D.C., George W. Bush took his own fears and spilled them out on the rest of the nation. He and Cheney and Rumsfeld warned of the constant threat of terrorism and spoke about mushroom clouds over America's cities and rogue dictators stocking up on weapons of mass destruction. They scared us into 2 unnecessary wars abroad and convinced us our safety at home depended on giving up our civil liberties. And thus came the Patriot Act and the National Defense Reauthorization Act that says the president can arrest and hold you forever without charges, just because he decided to. We responded to Bush's fear-mongering by declaring you and me terrorist suspects if we want to board a plane, forcing us to be x-rayed, have our nude bodies put on display, or groped by TSA agents. This is national hysteria. And even today, more than 3 years after Bush and his fear machine left the White House, and long after European countries started letting people keep their shoes on, we're still behaving like we're scared to death. We're pulling our children off planes. We're branding them as would-be bombers. 18-month-old Riyanna is not a terrorist, and neither is 7-year-old Dina Frank. They're just kids. And we're all supposed to be citizens living in the land of the free, in the home of the brave. It's time we started acting like it. We are not afraid.